Hello, my name is Davida Shinsky, and the name of this show is Live Without Limits on Google Hangout. And the title of this particular show is called The Changing Job Market. Now, I also have a radio show on Blog Talk Radio called Live Without Limits. That is why I am using this to brand myself as someone who teaches people how to live without limits. And one of the first things that I want to start talking about is tell you a story about how the job market has changed. And for many of you, this may sound familiar because I remember telling it to someone and he said to me, you just described every generation in my family. So when you think about all of those things and how the job market has changed, then you can understand how important it is to adapt into the job market today. The first generation that came to this country when there was a big influx of Europeans was during the early part of the 20th century. And many of those people, they brought with them their skills. And if you remember back in the early part of the 20th century, or if you remember seeing Fiddler on the Roof, you remember seeing Tevye. And what did he do? He had a horse. He had a little push cart, and he would take his milk, put it on his cart, and he would go from home to home selling the milk to his neighbors. And when they came to America, what did they do? They took their wares, they put it on push carts, and they stood on street corners selling their wares within the neighborhood. And I also remember how my father would talk about his father and how he used to sell fruit from the push cart on the street corner in Savannah, Georgia. And I remember also that my mother would talk about Uncle Barney. And why did she talk about Uncle Barney? Because her uncle, when they came to this country, what did he do? He lived in the high-rise. He worked as a janitor. But what he also did was he went to work for the steel mill, and the owner could not afford to pay him a salary. So he was willing to work for free until the owner was able to pay him. Therefore, what happened was that because he was loyal to the owner was loyal to him. And it was put in the owner's will that his sons could not fire Uncle Barney. They had to let him work until he was ready to retire. He worked until he was in his 70s, and he lived to be 99. And the first generation of the Europeans that were born in this country, many of them came of age during World War II. So because America had been good to them, they joined the army in the military, and they went over to Europe to fight for the freedom of the Americans. And then by the time they got out of the military, it was the beginning of the growth of the corporate era. And many of these people, this generation, went to work for the corporation. And it was kind of an unwritten rule at that time when you went to work for a corporation that you had a job for life. And many of that generation, and what they did was they went to work for the company. They started at the bottom. They worked their way up into a management level position. And then after 25 years, what did the company do? They gave them a retirement party and a gold watch. And that was also the time when the government and people were paying into Social Security. And at that time, they believed that if you retired after 25 years of working with a company, you had the ability to live comfortably on Social Security. And as we know, in today's marketplace, that is not true. And the second generation born in this country, that group of people that were born after 1946 up to 1964, well, they're known as the baby boomer generation, and many of them followed their parents into the corporate environment, thinking that they would have a job for life, just like their parents. But it was during the latter part of the 1990s into the early part of the era of the 2000s that corporations like IBM and AT&T offered buyout packages to their employees who had worked there 15 years or more. And what happened for many of them was that with the buyout package, they were guaranteed an income for, say, up to 6 to 9 months after they left the job, and they were continuing to get their medical benefits. And what this allowed them to do was to take the opportunity to look at self-employment. For some, self-employment became the way they went, and for others, and that was also the time that you saw where the multi-level marketing companies like Amway and Herbalife started to become a popular way of becoming self-employed. And for many of them, this also gave them the opportunity to look at building up a savings account, can't remember what it's called. Let's put it that way. So let me go on and just move on. And that then it was also the era of the Y2K era, where a lot of people who left IBM and had worked on computers, then they started setting themselves up as becoming self-employed. And during the Y2K era was just prior to the change of the 20th century to the 21st century. And a lot of people who had computers were afraid that their computers were going to crash the moment that the ball dropped and it was midnight and it was a new year and a new century. So a lot of the computer people were overinflating their prices to offer their skills to companies. So, and it was also the beginning of the dot-com era where prices were overinflated. So what did we find? That in essence, what did this bring about for the companies? It also meant that the dot-com era in the beginning crashed because it was not regulated right. And we also saw a lot of other things happening. But also, during the 1980s, it was the growth of the personal computers with Steve Jobs, and the personal computers needed software to run the computers on. And so what did Bill Gates do? He developed the software, but instead of just selling the software to the consumer, he licensed the software. Therefore, whenever they redesigned or they came out with a new product and they stopped doing updates for old products, then what did the individual have to do? They had to buy the new software. This was also the beginning of what we find and know as the technology era. And there is no such thing as a 9-to-5 job anymore. And what happened was, and we were talking about how with the baby boomer generation, many of them got pink slips. Many of them looked at self-employment. Well, that meant that for Generation X, for Generation Y, for the millennial generation, there are no longer any guaranteed jobs with the corporation, because what happened was there was no longer any loyalty by the employee to the corporation. Therefore, the corporation or the owners of the corporation or the management of the corporation were no longer loyal to their employees. And what's happening is the millennial generation is that generation that was born in the 1980s, and the growth of the computers, the growth of the internet, many of them are the people who develop the software programs today. They also can develop those video programs that you see. And they're also the generation that are known to be growing up during the MTV era, so that their attention span is very short. And what the technology era has done in influencing the job market, well, let's look at how that has worked in the job market today. For instance, many companies, instead of getting bigger and bigger office space, they can get a smaller office space. They buy the computer, they install the software, they give the employee the computer with the software installed and the telephone. They tell them, now go set up your internet and your phone service. And then what they're able to do is redirect all the calls that come in into each employee's home so that they can work with the customer. And what you're finding is Apple computers, what do they do today? They hire people to work as their technicians, but what they do it on is on the phone. And I have a friend that, what did she do? She went to work for Apple, and she had to pay them to train her. Then what she did was she told them what day she wanted to work, and they would redirect the calls in, and then as the customer called in that they had tech questions, then she answered their tech questions. And since she had a young child, this allowed her the opportunity to stay home with her child, be there when the child needed her, but also work at the same time. So as we're seeing, these are some of the things to consider when you're looking at employment today. And what we're seeing is more that the unemployment, the government is sitting there telling you the statistics of people who are filing for unemployment, and they keep talking about how it's rising, and the president keeps talking about how we need to create jobs, but he's not talking about how to teach people how to become entrepreneurs today. Because what we've done is, and what I'm talking about is that in the beginning of the 21st century, we've come full circle back to where we were at the beginning of the 20th century. Back then, they sold their wares on street corners in their local community. Today, with the advent of the internet, then what you're seeing are websites set up where companies can upload their pictures, can adapt their software, can actually put on training videos and teach you how to market their programs. And what they're doing is, instead of hiring salespeople to go sell their products in retail stores like Hi-Fi Buys, then what they're doing is setting up affiliate positions where you can actually purchase and use their product, and then by word of mouth refer someone that you know who joins the company as your direct recruit or distributor, and you earn a percentage off of every sale that they make. And this just allows companies to cut their overhead expenses and give it back to you as an individual. Plus, what is it also allowing you to do? It's allowing you to have tax breaks because you're working from home. And when you look at the cost of living today, it makes it more feasible that you are working from home instead of working and having to travel somewhere else and work in their office. And then the cost of living is much higher because you're having to pay for gas, or transportation, whether you use public transportation or you use your car, you have to pay for the gas, you have to pay, and it just allows you that by working from home, you get the same tax breaks as a company would have. And let me go back and tell you that some of the terms that have come out of the new generation of the job market is internet marketing, because just like using offline internet marketing techniques, whether you use media or you use TV or you use radio, the cost is so astronomical compared to just getting online and marketing through emails, marketing through autoresponders. The cost is pennies on the dollar for an email and a video, as opposed to what you would have to do if you went offline. And what's happening is that the millennials are buying more and more of their products online because they know how to use all of these techniques. And let me also compare for you how the job market has changed. What has changed it? For instance, not only is internet marketing a new technique, but job titles like website designer, those are things that you didn't even think about 10, 15 years ago. And what the website designer was 10, 15 years ago, they were the logo designer, they were the printer, they were the brochure designer. And now, by being able to design websites, and even with the technology of certain companies, even a website designer is becoming obsolete. But other jobs that you can think of was, back in the corporation, you had a secretarial pool where women worked for 4 or 5 different men, and they earned either an hourly wage or a set salary. Today, that job can be a virtual assistant. And as a virtual assistant, you charge each individual a set fee for each hour that you work. So what does that allow you to do? That allows you the opportunity to earn at the rate that you choose to charge them. And instead of being a set salary and getting work for 5 different people, and you're there and you can be there for a lot longer than the 9 to 5 because you've got to finish that job. Well, now you can choose to do and work the hours you choose, and you can choose if you can either start low or increase your rate based on the number of people that you have and how much you want to change. And what I'd like to talk about is also that, to show how the technology has changed, that because we market on the internet through websites, we have become a truly global economy. And because I work as a professional speaker and trainer, I would like to show you just how in one industry, how it changed just in a matter of 10, 15 years. That when I got into the profession in the 1980s, if you wanted to market yourself as a professional speaker, you had to have a media kit so that you can send it to corporations to compete and be hired as a keynote speaker or a breakout session for training. And how that worked was, you had to give, or what you would do is you would attend Toastmasters or your local National Speaking Association, and you would pay them a membership fee, and you would get the training and the skills on how to present at the front of the room, how to use your voice, how to use your body, how to be able to draw people in to what you're saying and use examples like what I'm doing here by telling you stories so that I can relate to you and show you just how what I'm saying not only affects you, but how it affected your parents, your grandparents, past generations, how it will reflect on future generations. And what we're also seeing is not only did you have to put together a media kit, but that meant you had to hire someone to come in and videotape you doing a presentation. You had to design your own brochures. You had to have them printed up. If a meeting place changed and you couldn't go and change it on the brochure except to throw it out and get new ones printed up, then that was just an extra expense. If you didn't go market yourself as a professional speaker to associations, your other alternative was to go to work for a training company where they set up the hotel where you were going to do the presentation. They did the marketing of the different presentations. And it may seem like when you are saying that you earned $250 a day, like that was a lot of money, but when you break it down to the time of what you spent on that day, and not only that, that you also had videotapes and audios that came in from Nightingale Conant that you would earn a percentage of as part of your income for the day. So you had to be good at doing back of the room sales. And let me tell you what would happen. You would fly into the city where you were starting on Monday, and your day usually started at 6 in the morning, so you'd have an opportunity to eat breakfast. Then, say by 7 o'clock in the morning, you had to be in the room doing a sound check to make sure that everyone could hear you. You had to make sure that your presentation materials were there. You had to make sure that all of the materials were there for the participants. And then at the end of the session, you didn't just leave. You had to make sure that whatever was left over from the back of the room sales were boxed up, ready to ship back to the company. Then you either had dinner or you got on the road, you got into the car, the rental car that you had, you would travel to the next city, and you may not get to the next city or the hotel to maybe 10, 11 o'clock that night. And you would do the same thing every day until Friday. Then Friday, you would fly home. Now, when you went to work for these training companies, you usually didn't expect to work more than 10 days a month. But you know what? Sometimes you could work anywhere from 15 to 20 days a month. And yes, that was a lot more money, but then you didn't have the time to spend with your family. Now, let me tell you how that has changed with the advent of the computer and the internet. First, what happened was speakers could design their own software programs and sell it through their website. And they can use affiliate marketers to help them sell their training programs and pay them a percentage by helping them market their programs. So, and often what speakers would do is they would set up a free teleseminar or webinar where what they did was they would do a presentation that would maybe last an hour or a little bit less, a little bit more, and then they would offer you the opportunity to, but for the first say 5 to 10 people who signed up within the next 10 to 15 minutes, they would get a 10 or 15% discount by being the first ones to sign up. Well, that went from teleseminars to webinars where you would register with GoToMeeting and you would pay them upwards of $500 a month, and all you could do was only 1,000 people on in the class, in the presentation, and they could answer they could ask you questions and you would answer them in the virtual room, just like you were doing the same presentation in a hotel room. You were working from home. Now you have Google Hangouts, which is what I am offering here, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm presenting to you my information, how I can help you as that what I do is I'm a career and personal development strategy coach, and I can help you lay out a plan for your success, for yourself, a mission on where you are now, where you want to be, whether it's working for a company, how you want to take and maybe start your own business, what other affiliate marketing companies out there that you would be using their products and their services and earn extra income as an affiliate or a distributor with them on their products. So you see, there's so many ways today that the technology has helped us to live a better quality of life because we have the time to spend with our families more, because you can work from home, do the same thing that you were traveling on the road for, and you could even reach a wider area of people. And let me explain to you something. I have cerebral palsy, and what that means is that I can do anything I choose to do, but I was born in an era when society did not recognize its disability community, and in their eyes, and in so many ways, that if I was told you could not succeed simply because you are limited. And let me tell you how it has limited me. That the cerebral palsy is a neuromuscular disability, and it mainly affects my right side. And that means I don't have peripheral vision or depth perception in my right eye, that I have limited use of my right hand, but if I work at it correctly, if I do exercise, then there is nothing that I can't do within the limitations. What it also means is that I learn differently. And in learning differently, that means that how my brain processes information. And so many times that what happened was that when I was born in the 1950s, there were no laws guaranteeing people with disabilities the right to an education. And I was in the classroom because my disability was mild, but the teachers didn't understand that how my brain processed information. I didn't always show what I was capable of doing in tests. So they kind of assumed because I didn't test well that my opportunities were limited. Well, I actually went to graduate school, and I have an associate's degree in mental health and a bachelor's degree in psychology, and credits towards my master's degree in rehabilitation counseling. What that means is that rehabilitation counseling is employment counseling. And because I understand what is going on in employment, and because I didn't have the opportunity to go to work in the corporation, that I had to look for alternatives. I had to look for other ways that I could get out there and work and do what I needed to do as an individual and make things work for myself so that I can live a productive life in society. And what it does is I have no feeling on my right side, and I also don't have, my gait is off when I walk. So as long as I understand what compensation I need to do, and I understand that I have to exercise to keep up the strength and the balance, then I can compete in almost any job market within my limitations. And one thing I can tell you with the use of the computer, that because I have a disability and because I've been self-employed, that I was able to get through rehabilitation services certain software that would help me in my business. For instance, I use Dragon Naturally Speaking, that is a speech to text software that, as you notice, I'm using a headset, and it goes to my software, that if I dictate anything and I train the software to recognize my voice, then it will do my typing for me. And many things that were developed for people with disabilities have become mainstream in today's marketplace. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for listening to my presentation and remind you, you can go to listen to my radio show at blogtalkradio.com/Career Performance Institute. Or you can go to my website, the number 1, personalcareercoach.com, to find out what types of programs I offer and sign up for either individual or group coaching. And you can also go to my website, askdavidashinsky.com, and if you have any questions you need to ask, you can leave it there. And you can also read some blogs or articles that I have written that are posted there. And you can also go there and listen to this presentation.